Chapter 205 Journey to the South. Chapter 205 Journey to the South. Sadly, the cohort did not get a lot of time to rest. Despite the fact that it wasn't even noon yet, they had a lot of ground to cover before sunset. The plan they had made at the start of the day was to leave the Dark City from the south by climbing the wall near the grandiose main gates and then travel through the labyrinth to the next safe height, which was about 10 kilometers away. However, due to the fact that they had ended up in the catacombs instead and had to escape through the chamber belonging to the Lord of the Dead, the party was now to the east of the ruins, near the beautiful statue of the Faceless Woman. Not only did they have to circle around the city now, but there was also less time to reach safety before the flood of darkness devoured the forgotten shore once again. Standing up in a chorus of disappointed groans, the cohort assumed the marching formation and set out south. Walking through the mud of the colossal crater was not easy, but for the time being, they had no other choice, unless they wanted to scale the monumental stone wall and return to the Dark City, of course. Luckily, with both Sunny's shadow and Kai scouting the way ahead, they didn't have to worry about being ambushed by monsters. So, for the time being, the only thing the party had to struggle with was moving their feet through the wet dirt. The monotonous silence was broken only by laborious breathing and slurping of mud. A while later, the impregnable and seemingly endless gray wall that loomed some distance away and above them slowly twisted, drifting away from the edge of the crater. They were finally leaving the cursed ruins behind. Turning around, Sunny looked back and studied the site of the city that had been his whole world for these past 4, almost 5 months. Far away, the floor of the gargantuan crater sharply rose, forming a tall slope. On it stood the unassailable wall of polished gray stone, firm and unyielding despite the thousands of years that had passed since the demise of its creators. From where he stood, Sunny could see the flood of crimson coral swelling at its base, sharp blades powerlessly scraping against the cold stone in hopeless attempts to find purchase. It looked as though the city was being besieged by the land itself. If it knew what awaits inside, the labyrinth would be trying to escape as far as possible from that damned place instead. With a sigh, Sunny looked up and noticed a lone human figure standing on the wall, watching them disappear into the distance. That figure was crooked and dark, emanating a cold feeling of foreboding. A few moments later, it turned away and disappeared from view. Haruz had chosen to return to the bright castle. Trying not to shiver, Sunny lingered for a few seconds, and then hurried to catch up with the group. They were safe from him, at least, for now. Because the crater was too big, the bent of its edge was almost imperceptible. Only by looking far into the distance could one say that it was actually curved. Because of this, the cohort could have continued traveling through the crater for a long time without having to move farther away from the goal of today's journey, which lay to the southwest of their current position. However, they had to leave the crater and return to the labyrinth sooner or later, not only to escape the black water, but also because there was nothing to hide behind on this vast muddy plain. If any flying nightmare creature decided to attack them from above, the cohort would have no defense against it. The labyrinth, while hiding its own fair share of terrifying threats, at least offered some measure of protection. That's why, at some point, Nephites led the party to the sharp slope of the crater, and the 6 of them climbed out of it. With the help of Kai and the trusty golden rope, the task wasn't hard at all. For some time after that, they walked on the ridge separating the crater from the labyrinth proper, but then, finally, had to turn west and enter the maze of crimson coral. Sunny couldn't help but sigh once the familiar coral walls surrounded him once again. He didn't miss the first months of his infernal voyage into the dream realm at all. Well, maybe a little. But not because of the damn labyrinth itself, that's for sure. The Crimson Forest was simultaneously the same and vastly different from the region of it that he had traveled through before. The coral maze itself was pretty much identical to how it had been east of the gargantuan crater. However, the creatures populating it in these parts were vastly different. There were no members of the Carapace Legion around, at least not anywhere Sunny could see. Instead, the dominant tribe of nightmare creatures in this region seemed to consist of nasty, spider-like critters that had a habit of decorating the walls and passages of the labyrinth with endless amounts of gray, incredibly sticky cobwebs. What's worse, their webs seemed to be made not out of spider silk, but out of thin metal wires that were as tough as iron and could cut the victim into little pieces if it thrashed too much after getting caught. Needless to say, getting yourself stuck in these webs was tantamount to a death sentence. The deeper into the labyrinth they went, the more of these cobwebs surrounded them. It came to the point where they had to use Cassie's flying rapier to clear the path ahead every few minutes, slowing down the speed of the cohort to a crawl. During one of these stops, Sonny rubbed his face and thought, "I just hope that nothing attacks us while we wait." Turning to him, the shadow glared for a few moments, and then tiredly shook its head. It then placed one palm across its face and looked down, as if defeated. "What? What did I say?" A moment later, several massive spider-like creatures jumped out of the cracks in the coral and attacked them. Chapter 206 Triumph. Chapter 206 Triumph. The spiders were about the size of a human, incredibly fast, and had plates of something that resembled iron covering parts of their repulsive bodies. They looked like armored battle machines created for the sole purpose of slaughtering living things. They also looked strangely familiar. With a little effort, Sonny realized that these abominations looked a lot like lesser, much smaller versions of the giant fallen beasts that had destroyed the original Stone Saint and her kin. It's just that their size and armor weren't nearly as formidable. If so, I have bad news for you, fools. As soon as the spiders attacked, the members of the cohort reacted with the deadly calmness of experienced Dark City hunters. Weapons flashed in the air, severing limbs and piercing through iron as though it was paper. Effie straight up flattened one of the creatures with a devastating strike of her battered shield. The poor beast didn't even have time to understand what a huge mistake it had made. The others were no less efficient. Sonny himself threw the prowling thorn and pulled on the invisible string as soon as it sunk into the flesh of one of the spiders, bringing its jump to an abrupt end and sending it crashing to the ground. Before the beast could stand up, Quiet Dancer streaked through the air and pierced its head clean through. Just a few short seconds after the spiders had tried to ambush the group of humans, the battle was over. 3 dead nightmare creatures were sprawled in the mud, while the 4th one ended up pinned to a coral wall with several arrows. They could have even shaved a second or two if it weren't for the need to look out for the spiderwebs. Sonny shook his head. Disappointing. Wait. Why was he disappointed? Great. This was great. Not every victory had to almost cost him his life. If there was one thing to feel disappointed about, it was that this one was so swift that he had not even gotten the chance to finish any of the enemies himself, thus not receiving any rewards from the spell. But even then, he would be glad to only fight easy battles like this in the future. Nephi's cleaned the blade of her sword with a piece of cloth, listened to the silence for a few moments to make sure that nothing else was going to attack them, and then gave the cohort a go-ahead to start dressing the monsters down. Soon, soul shards, strips of meat, and other useful parts were cut, cleaned, and put into Effie's enchanted bag. Everything was done with efficient speed and professionalism that could only come from a lot of experience. Sonny could only shake his head again. They were able to dispose of the iron spiders with such ease because of 2 reasons. First, as far as nightmare creatures went, these ones were not on the same level as, for example, carapace scavengers. They had a slight advantage in speed, but were not nearly as strong, agile, and ridiculously tough. If Sonny could guess, he would say that the iron spiders relied heavily on their webs and battlefield advantage to defeat the prey. Because the cohort had destroyed the webs in advance, their main advantage was gone. The second reason was the cohort itself. They were some of the deadliest humans on the Forgotten Shore. Sonny was sure that at least 4 of them could kill a pathfinder of the host in single combat, if not one of the lieutenants themselves. They were the best and the brightest the outer settlement could offer, after all. Effie had been right when she said that there had never been such a powerful cohort outside the walls of the Bright Castle before. All in all, the 6 of them were more than equipped to handle just 3 awakened beasts. The labyrinth was going to really try harder if it wished to see them dead. Sunny chuckled. Just 3 awakened beasts, yeah? How crazy did this sound? And yet, it was true. Finishing up with the dead spiders, the cohort indifferently left their eviscerated bodies behind and continued on their way. After several more minor skirmishes with the iron spiders, they had finally reached their destination. Not too far away from them, colored pink by the evening sun, a magnificent arch of white marble rose high above the sea of crimson coral. The giant structure was clearly created by the same people who had built the bright castle, and made from the same stone. It looked like a much larger sibling of the pristine arch that guarded the entrance to the white road which climbed all the way to the outer settlement. Only this one was much more weathered, bleak, and damaged. Signs of corrosion and deep cracks covered its surface, with one of its sides being partially collapsed. Sunny studied the arch and looked at Nephi's. "This is our stop for the night." She gave him a simple nod and said after a short pause, "We need to pick up our pace. The night is close, and we might have to fight to clear the top of it." Sunny sighed. Fighting again. When would they finally be able to rest? It had been such a long day. However, he kept his mouth shut. Changing Star was the most tired out of all of them, due to healing all their wounds, no less. And he didn't see her complaining. So it wasn't his place. To his left, Effie suddenly cursed and groaned. "More fighting? Come on! When are we finally going to eat?" Sunny blinked. "Well, that works too, I guess." Staring at the huntress, Nephi shook her head and silently walked forward. Soon, they reached the giant arch. Kai summoned his bow and flew up, only to return a few minutes later and report that no terrible monster was nesting on top of the ancient structure. With sighs of relief, the members of the cohort climbed the golden rope one after another, and were soon standing far above the labyrinth, silently watching as the flood of black water drowned it in the lightless depths. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, they were left on a rectangular island made out of white marble. All around it, there was nothing but the undulating waves of the dark sea. Sunny was once again surrounded from all sides by nothing but darkness and black water. He did not like the feeling. Chapter 207 Beach Episode. Chapter 207 Beach Episode. The night passed with no incidents. In the morning, Sunny was woken up by the sound of the surging waves and opened his eyes to see the sun slowly rising from beyond the horizon. Rubbing his face, he sat up and looked around, noticing that most of the cohort was still asleep. Only Kai, who had been the last one to stand watch, was awake, sitting on the edge of the arch and admiring the dawn with a dreamy look on his face. Sunny wanted to call out to him and warn the charming archer not to sit this close to the edge, but then remembered that Kai could fly. Yeah? Like I would forget it again. Using the opportunity, he dove into the Soul Sea and summoned Stone Saint from the depths of the Shadow Core, where she was sleeping in the embrace of nurturing black flames. Just like before, the shadow did not appear from a sphere of light like an echo would, but stepped out from a whirlpool of dark fire. Then, she stood motionlessly in front of Sunny like an actual statue, seemingly indifferent both to his presence and the wounds covering her body. Sunny walked around the Stone Saint, studying the extent of damage done to her by the undead horde. The armor of the taciturn knight was battered and broken, pierced in several places by the claws of the countless skeletons she had fought. The ruby dust wasn't flowing from the breaches anymore, but he could see deep gashes on her smooth, gray skin. Bastards! Who dares to hurt his shadow? Shaking his head, Sunny dismissed the saint, sending her back into the restorative darkness of the Shadow Core. The damage, while extensive, was not really threatening to her existence. In a couple of days his pet monsters should fully recover. In fact, she already looked better than she had yesterday. Leaving the Soul Sea, Sunny inhaled the fresh air, lingered for a few moments, and then turned to Kai. "Hey, Knight! Are you stupid? Don't sit this close to the edge." The charming archer looked at him and raised an eyebrow. "I can fly, remember? If I fall, Sunny scoffed. I'm not worried about you falling into the cursed sea. I am worried about something dragging you off into it. That'd be terrible, right? Quite happy with himself, he grinned and turned away. What a nice way to start the day. Because everyone needed some time to rest and recuperate, they decided to spend a day on the Marble Arch and continue their journey tomorrow. As the result, Sunny was currently staring at the sight that wasn't really funny, but filled him with mirth nevertheless. Back in the real world, when he had time to consume some entertainment, Sunny had noticed a certain popular trope. In most dramas, webtoons, and cartoons aimed at young boys and teenagers, the heroes would inevitably end up spending a day at the beach during their adventures. He didn't quite know why such a trope existed, but suspected that it was just an excuse to show the female characters in nothing but revealing swimsuits. Not that he had anything against it, in any case. Sunny had never imagined that he was going to end up in such an episode himself one day. This is simply hilarious. Barely holding himself from laughing out loud, Sunny glanced at his companions. Because everyone's armor and weapons were damaged during the battle in the catacombs, they had to keep these memories inside the Soul Sea for a bit of time to allow them to restore themselves, just like Stone Saint was currently doing in the depths of his shadow core. As the result, all of them, including Sunny himself, were currently wearing nothing except for some loincloths and, in the case of the girls, makeshift brassieres. Provided, these crude undergarments weren't really swimsuits, and the Marble Arch could barely be considered a beach even at night. But still, the situation was funnily similar. They were all half naked and relaxing in the middle of something that someone could call an adventure, so it was close enough. Ha! He was in a rather good mood. Everyone was busy doing their thing. There was a fire in the middle of the arch, with roasting meat filling the air with an appetizing aroma. Effie was tending to it. The tan and lean body of the muscular huntress looked like it was cut from stone, as if she was a sculpture of an ancient goddess come to life. Sunny tried to count her abs and got distracted halfway through by not-so-stone-like parts of her robust figure. After a couple of seconds of thoughtless bliss, Sunny had to hurriedly look away. The last thing he wanted was pure thoughts. Nephi's was helping Effie with the breakfast. Next to the vigorous huntress, her figure seemed especially slender and lithe. However, she was also extremely athletic in appearance. Her ivory skin was pleasantly contrasted against the olive skin of their boisterous Pathfinder. What a sight to behold! From a purely aesthetic standpoint, of course. Seeing Changing Star like that reminded Sunny of the early days of their stay in the Dream Realm. Things had been much simpler back then. Suddenly wistful, he looked away and checked what Cassie was doing. The blind girl was resting near the fire, wrapped in her beautiful cloak. With her delicate features and small stature, she looked extremely lovely. And then, there were Kai and Castor. Sunny sighed and looked down at his own scrawny body. Honestly, after all these months spent hunting monsters, eating meat and absorbing shadow fragments, he looked much better than he used to. In fact, by human standards, he was nothing short of, well, above average. Even as far as Awakened went, he could probably compete with some in the looks department. But those two specimens were simply on another level. Kai was tall and shaped like a young god, with lean muscles rolling under his flawless skin and a svelte figure that begged to be sculpted into a marble masterpiece. Sunny could swear that even sunlight was attracted to him, illuminating the charming archer in just a way to make him look as gorgeous as possible. Currently, Kai was tending to his arrows, somehow managing to make even that simple task look glamorous. Castor was much the same, with a perfect body and broad shoulders that simply screamed of power, appeal and potency. With a darker skin to match his gallant and manly image, he was basically the epitome of masculinity. This was contrasted by a handsome, but gentle face and humorous green eyes, creating a rather tempting visage. Sunny grimaced and turned away. You know what? To hell with this beach day nonsense. Let's do something productive.